This is OffPlanet Radio.
And we welcome you back to hour number 2, running 15 minutes late tonight, OffPlanet Radio Live. We had major technical problems with phone lines, as you heard with Ev's voice. As we went through the hour, the whole thing just began to break down, which is really hard to understand. We're running like major bandwidth through here. We've got great connections, great computers. And to answer the question, yes, this is OffPlanet Radio Live. We are still doing a live show. The show is recorded on Wednesday nights, East Coast time, 9 to 11 p.m. at offplanetradio.net, because somebody on Facebook just said that somebody out there had said that I was no longer doing live radio since I left the old network. Not true. We're going to continue to do this independently, on our own, because we don't get screwed with as much this way. So yes, we are going to continue to do live shows. The show is recorded before a live studio audience. No small animals were harmed in the making of this show. And my guest this hour, Crystal Clark, James C. Horak, and Ev Hallford is also on the line. And this will probably be a bare-knuckle ride as well. Good evening, Crystal, and good evening, James.
Good evening, Randy.
Good evening.
It's good to talk to you guys. I named this show Cosmic Conundrum, and it was like one of those wild moments when I just went, I want to call it something, because I've got different guests and I've got different topics, but there's a common key in all of this. And Crystal kind of pointed out, well, first off, the word conundrum. What is a conundrum? Well, it's kind of, the dictionary says it's a confusing and difficult question or problem, but it also says it's a question asked for amusement, typically one with a pun in its answer or a riddle. You know, both of these definitions struck me equally, because in a lot of ways we're dealing with dark humor, and we're dealing with riddles and mysteries and things that we just can't wrap our minds around. We have contradictions. Crystal, you brought up something very interesting about the words related to mysticism and mystic, I believe, as kind of a connection to conundrum.
Yes, it's a very interesting thing that if people look up the definition of mystification, it does not mean what they think it means, and in fact, one of the synonyms for the word is bamboozled. And I think that's really, really important, because there are so many things that we're being taught and told that are designed to run us in circles. They are not designed to take us forward. And, you know, there are other articles I've written where I've talked about this, in that there's a box around our free will, our imagination, what we are allowed to say and do and learn, and our freedom ends where their power begins. And we can see that we're being squeezed. The more power they exert, the less freedom that we have. A lot of people can say an awful lot of words that don't actually mean anything, and in many senses, the word quantum has become one of those words. What does it mean? It's like frequency. You ask people, what does frequency mean? They don't know. It means how frequently something happens. What's the something? What is it? Do they know? And this is a real problem, but there is something else that I would like to get to, that I would like to start with, because I'm seeing this, because we are in a phase where there is an unfolding happening. People refer to it as the lifting of the veil, a rise in consciousness, many, many different ways to describe it. But it affects people in ways that I don't know that they're particularly prepared for, and I think that this is important. In the first book I wrote, which again is not available anymore, I took it off the market to revise it. There was a section in which I felt really compelled to explain to people the psychological impact of discovering that most of what you thought was true isn't. And this is something that I went through years ago in a very compressed amount of time. It continued to happen. It's still continuing to happen, and it will keep on happening because we just aren't there yet. And there's a quote that I really love. It's by a man named Alvin Toffler. I don't know much about him. I found the quote, and I especially liked it.
He's a
because
futurist.
It really embodies.
Future Shock.
Oh.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense because there's a lot to it. And it says, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And as I've explained before, the blog that I'm developing is a way to release the information in a very, very condensed way as quickly as possible and for free, but it's difficult. And I know that it is somewhat absurd to ask people to read it in order when it has not been laid out in order. But at the same time, the section on the sacred science is really important, and I have rewritten the beginning of it so many times because, in a sense, you don't want to set up an expectation for a person that may not develop. You don't want to limit the possibilities of the way that they may perceive it. But at the same time, I know what people are going to go through. I still see them going through it, and this is basically what I'm trying to get at. When the truth about things comes out, it psychologically affects good people the most. And what I mean by, quote, good people are the people that really genuinely wanted to do right by those they love, and they really believed that they were doing the right thing. And what they are going to discover is that nearly every time that they thought that they were doing what they were supposed to do to protect themselves and their family and their loved ones, they were actually causing damage. And this was done through ignorance and manipulation. And when a person comes to this realization, there are several different things that happen. The first one is embarrassment. They feel embarrassed. And then there's anger, betrayal, but then they get to a point where they don't trust themselves anymore to make the right decision because they begin to understand garbage in, garbage out. So again, I'm going back to the importance, the critical importance to the survival of our race of proper knowledge. We have to have it. Discernment is another one of those words like quantum and all these other words that doesn't mean anything if you can't base it on something solid. If you don't have proper knowledge, what are you going to base discernment on? And this is so important because people are emotionally manipulated because they don't know any better.
We talked about this in some private conversations, the three of us, you, James, and Crystal and I. But I think it's a broader conversation of how we even know truth anymore, because there is so much churning of information out there. I mean, you talked about this constant refresh cycle on knowledge. Well, frequencies, cycles, cycles and frequencies are all part of this whole television broadcast frequency meme that is going through the show tonight. But we now live in a world where all forms of information are equally credible in a lot of ways. And we're forced to use what I can only call the sixth sense. You would call it spiritual discernment. It's getting to that level because the truth and the lies are incredibly similar to each other. Do you get the sense right now that we're just in this like complete freak out information war where we're just everything's being blasted at us constantly?
You know, I don't see it that way. I don't think that our sixth sense is our first line of defense. I think that common sense is. And it's really important that people... What is common sense?
Because if they're constantly churning what we would call common sense, I'm not sure we have a definition for that anymore, Crystal.
I'll give you one. The ability to deal with the obvious.
Yes, and that's the thing. That's exactly the point that I was going to make, is that people are being told that they are seeing something different than they are actually seeing. And if enough people say it, they will actually go with what other people said rather than what they've seen or experienced. And common sense is your own experience, your real experience, and the ability to see where it goes. So let me give you an example of what I'm saying. And this is important, and I always talk about it this way. If people understood the patterns, they can apply them across the board. We have two different lines of thought that have been rebranded. They are essentially the same. One is rapture from a Christian perspective, and one is ascension from the New Age perspective. It's the same thing. It's been relabeled. But in both cases, what these teachings are showing people is that you will be rewarded for looking the other way and doing absolutely nothing to prevent the suffering of others. And the real key in that phrase is, you will be rewarded for looking the other way. Now, how many times have you sat down and watched a film or a movie, whether it's a cop show or there are politicians involved? This is the exact same pattern of corruption, because this is how it works. If you want to get promoted, you need to look the other way. And this is what people have to get. It's always the same pattern over and over and over. And people are being duped into participating in their own demise because they have been taught not to know any better. And cognitive dissonance has to be addressed, because you have a lot of people saying, well, we can just pray and intend all of this away. But I'll tell you right now, if your son breaks his leg, you are not going to stick him in a room and go pray about it. You're going to take him to the emergency room and you're going to have it fixed. We have to deal with what's happening here, and looking the other way won't make it happen. That's common sense.
Is there an awakening going on? Crystal?
There is, but I would pose this question. What good does it do for a sleeping man to wake up if he never gets out of bed and acts on what he learned when he woke up?
And I understand what you're saying. So what is the action that we need to do? Where do we go from here? You know, and this is not an audience where you would say people are apathetic or not involved on some level, but I also think most people at this point look at the situations we're talking about, and it's like they're much bigger than we are. On an individual level, we can address certain aspects of this. I can't personally stop chemtrailing. I can't personally go out and stop the marauding that's going on in the financial system right now, but I can pull away from that system and attempt to take as much energy away from it. Where do we go with this? What are the actions that you're calling for us to take?
Well, first of all, there has to be accountability, and there isn't any. You know, we have people saying, well, we need a new financial system and we need new rules. But at the same time, the public doesn't make them follow the rules they already have. So if we institute a new system, but we maintain our apathy, what are we going to expect? The rules are there for a reason. If they are just rules, they need to be upheld. And if the people responsible for upholding those rules won't do it, then we need to make sure that people are put in that do. We can't let things go. We let things go. Well, somebody else is going to take care of it. Oh, all the good people out there would never let that happen. You see, this is the thing that I say over and over and over again, and I say it because I mean it. We are stuck on a loop that we will not survive. We will not survive it. We have never survived it. 6 times we have done this. And apathy and just talking about it won't fix it. But at the same time, that's why I always go back to proper knowledge. If people don't have proper knowledge, they don't know what to do, and that's the point. It's like saying, well, people who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. That's true, but people need to recognize that history and those patterns were intentionally removed from the collective so that we would repeat it and repeat it without resistance, because we wouldn't know any better. Proper knowledge has to come out. It has to.
Well, people have no appreciation for determinism, whether it's in economics or the political arena. First of all, the greatest evil that we have in Washington, D.C. is PACs. What do PACs do? They bribe politicians.
Political action committees.
That's right.
Yeah.
They're there for bribing. Take economics, for instance. There isn't a good economist in the world that didn't know NAFTA and GATT would be a death knell for any industrial nation that allowed such unfair treaty arrangements. They knew this, and yet they kept silent because they were told, oh, well, don't worry about that. The United States is protected by the petrodollar. Well, we're about to be no longer protected by the petrodollar. And that is where the fear of hyperinflation comes from. These are determinisms. These are not a matter of conjecture. It's a matter of a balance sheet.
I think part of where we may diverge a little bit here is we don't have a lack of logic. Although, as you pointed out, we have this split consciousness. But the logic abounds. You can go into a courtroom and you could drag all these bastards in there and prosecute them for breaking their own laws, and they will logically take you apart in the courtroom.
Well, they use legalese to do that, Randy. Do you know that if you don't use the proper phraseology...
I understand that, yeah.
...that your plea is not accepted, that your evidence will not be registered in the court record? And it's legalese. It's empty of any logic. It's a matter of a prescription someone thought up to keep the common man, the working class stiff, from having an equal footing and a balanced playing field when he tries to represent himself.
So we argue about an economic system, but really the economic system itself is a false entity. No economic system at all is required for human beings to trade among themselves in a world where people were just.
Well, look at GMOs. Look at Monsanto and how it's using the law to cram GMOs down our throats. Now, it's not just that we're being poisoned with these genetically engineered foodstuffs. It is that they've taken away our alternatives to produce our own food.
So that is one level where, we could take some responsibility on a mass scale. And, you make a good point here.
Well, let me say this, and this sounds prosaic, but you get off your butt, you go out, you talk to your neighbors, your relatives, you find a way to reach them, because hard times are here, and they're going to grow worse. You don't have to wait any longer for this to come home to them. 10 years ago, it wouldn't work. Today, it's different.
Most people don't understand that this has been planned for a very long time.
Well, you crack the ice, and when you get a person to a point where they're curious about why it's this way, after they know and realize it fully is, then they'll start asking, well, how did it come about? Then their mind is open for what you have to say, and you can reach them. It's nothing that union organizers, that people that have done grassroots work for politicians have not done for 120 years in this country. It's what you do. It's honorable as long as you're dealing with the truth and you're working for a goal that is of interest to a majority of people.
Well, most people want to come to some kind of understanding why the economic system seems to be collapsing around them. And, when...
Well, they have clues now. I mean, when the savings and loans went under Reagan, a lot of them woke up then. When the junk bond market went down and they connected the junk bond market to the rape of these savings and loans, this was a device to get unsecured loans because no longer were these savings and loans under any regulation. So junk bonds were devised as an instrument to rape them. And today, it's so brazen. Look at what's happening in Europe right now. In Europe, they're about to have an area like we have in the Cayman Islands take 10% of everyone's account that has money in their banks. Now, this is
and they wanted 40.
Yeah, well, they'll probably try to get more. What we don't understand as common people, generally, is that when you win something in Congress, when a bill is defeated that you fought against or fought for or whatever, the monsters, usually represented by PACs, come back at you with a modified attempt to get the same thing through. After it's been ruled out, after it's been voted on and put out, it just comes back, like gun control. How many times as gun control have they tried to shove that down our throats? How many times? It's countless. And this has been going on now for 30 years. 30 years. At one time, you couldn't own an assault rifle legally in this country. People did.
Well, you say legally. Legally is their system. You know,
That's right.
It's not lawful.
Well, yes.
It's legal.
Well,
there's a distinction between it.
The interesting thing is that people don't realize they can't take a constitution away from us unless we agree to it.
Yes.
If we file one case after another, go out and do what the Constitution allows you to do, they throw their made-up law at you, and you say, that's unconstitutional. I am abiding my constitutional rights, and that's the only social contract I have with you critters. Now stick that in your craw.
Well, I would argue that there are people doing that. And I would argue that
there are people that are traveling around the United States with guns on their dashboard. And when they're stopped and they say, well, do you have a permit? I don't need one.
Well, what I was talking about was in the legal area. Because, quite honestly, the first line of defense, it's great we have all these guns. Good luck when everything finally comes down buying ammo for them unless you're a reloader. Because the ammo is where they're drying it up right now. There's a big article in Wired magazine this month, which is basically saying we need to take the ammo away. We're never going to get the guns back, which was the argument that they've always known they couldn't make. You can't get the guns back. We are armed to the teeth in this country.
Randy,
so that's what their plan is to take the bullets away from everybody.
People believe that makes a difference. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, there are people that have enough ammunition stored that they'll share with people of like-mindedness. There are National Guard armories where people that work there have already told militia groups, well, if it hits the fan, here are the keys.
And I understand all that, James. My issue is the rhetoric behind this inevitability of a civil war in the United States. And it has become a persistent meme in this country. I don't believe it's necessary. I don't believe we have to go to war with ourselves. I don't believe we have to go to war with our government if we can take them apart legally, if we can take them apart morally. And yes, I do believe this is a spiritual war, and I do believe that discernment is a spiritual gift, and I do believe that our logic sometimes makes fools of us. And that's not repudiate what you...
That's not going to be determined by the people in the street and people like you and me. That's going to be determined by the people that work inside the machine, coming to their senses and realizing that the policymakers are insane and saying, I won't do it.
Well, it's a suicidal system. They're not just at war with us. They're so insane, they're so sick and psychopathic, they're destroying their own system, and there aren't enough bunkers for all of these people.
Well, the bunkers are not secure. I've mentioned this before.
We know
they
that.
They go in the ground like rats in a hole in the ground. They'll die there.
Can I ask you another question? I don't want to interrupt, but
sure.
My son is finishing up with his biology degree from at Stony Brook, and he says that they're talking about possible extinction of all humanity because of what they call the demographic winter, the fact that no one is having any children anymore. And he said,
how did we get to a planet with almost 7 billion people in it if nobody's having children? We went...
Well, there's truth to what he said. And
I understand that.
Yes.
And that And I see this pervasive attitude, especially among people my son's age now. And we've talked about his history, the fact that now he's 21 and they've got 2 little children, and the whole history as to, as to that situation. But in a way, I'm grateful that at least they're having children when so many young people are talking about having no children at all.
Well, this is based on the overpopulation lie that we've been sold. And, it's bothersome to me that people are redirected to squabble in a little pool that won't make a difference in the long run, like the abortion issue. Is it legal or is it not? While they're preoccupied with that, they are not making themselves available enough to see that there is a massive, massive wave of genocide happening on this planet. GMOs sterilize animals, and they're feeding them to us. Vaccines sterilize people. We are being sterilized. So at some point, whether abortion is legal or not is going to become irrelevant, and it's going to come sooner than later if people don't do something to prevent it.
I think, that we're in serious risk of people not having any more children. Like this silly movie, The Children of Men, where no one can have any children anymore.
With things the way they are, is that a bad thing?
Well, as the scriptures say, in the last days it'd be better for a woman not to be suckling a young one. I can understand, given the potential downside.
But you see that we're almost like dealing with inevitabilities here. It's like, let's just chuck the whole ball of wax, because I am not willing to cede fatalism. I am not willing to give up. I am an optimist. But I'm an optimist who looks at this from 2 sides of it. How much information can we get out quick enough to stem off the tide of what's coming at us? What is our plan personally, and what is our plans in terms of a society to survive?
Randy, you have to have people's attention. And I have said this before, and I'll say it again. When the American public goes 2 days without eating, you'll have their attention.
And, this is the other thing. The way these people operate, what we call the global handlers, the shadow government, whatever term we give them, it's not really that complicated. And I've tried to explain this pattern before, and it applies. They do it over and over and over again. It's the shakedown. And believe it or not, even in the 1940s, the word shakedown was in the dictionary. It has a very real meaning to it. It's extortion. It's blackmail. Mm-hmm. It's an enforced levy or contribution, a mean bed or resting place, usually on the floor. Now, the word levy is very interesting because it means to raise or collect as an army or tax, seize an execution. And here's the thing. All of this is a shakedown. It's a shakedown. The most basic definition of a shakedown, which most people will identify with, is the mob movies, where you have a mom and pop shop that are doing the best they can to do better for their children and provide a better future. And in walks the thuggery, smashes everything, maybe roughs up the mom and pop, steals the money out of their till, and then looks at them and says, I think you need protection. This is what people don't get. Global warming is a lie. They are causing the weather changes with technology. But, oh, by the way, if you pay us some protection money in the form of carbon taxes, we'll fix it for you. You see, they cause the problems, and then they make you pay for it. And in the process of all of that, and this is very prolific right now, and it's something that I extremely dislike, are all the excuses. Oh, the ETs are doing it. Oh, it's the Archons doing it. Oh, it's the
Death Star moon.
It's the transdimensional entities and the demons that are making these people do it. That is a lie, and they do not deserve those excuses because they aren't true. These people are causing the problem. It's just like Al-Qaeda. There is no Al-Qaeda. They are Al-Qaeda. And it's really sad because it's like a really bad cartoon where they cause the problem, but they tell you somebody else did it, and the entire planet runs with their torches and pitchforks in the opposite direction from the people that really brought them the problems. It's not that complicated. It really isn't. They do the same thing over and over and over. It's like vaccines. Well, you're going to infect other children if you don't vaccinate your child. Well, how is that possible if vaccines really work and the other kids got the vaccine?
That's right. Doesn't even work out in terms of classic immunology.
No.
Your unimmunized neighbor is of no threat to you if immunization works. If it doesn't work, you've wasted your time and you're probably going to get something anyway. Not to mention the fact that you've now polluted your body.
Well, you'll get the disease you're being immunized against.
Well, that's exactly right.
Yes.
But the interesting thing is that now with this new healthcare system that they've forced upon us,
which is a shakedown because it's a levy and it's being forced.
And there's a number of people that have written me. I was in a email conversation with some bozo reporter from the Denver Post who was arguing that it was perfectly okay to force healthcare professionals inside of hospitals, force them to be immunized as part of their labor contract. And I was like, well, gee, why don't you just stick the gun in their mouth and you can blow their head off as part of their labor contract too. And the sophistry behind the arguments that were made by this reporter were frightening. I finally cut it off. This is a major newspaper in a major city, Denver. And this reporter was using sophistry to make the argument that people should be forced to be immunized.
Well, he'll keep his job, Randy.
Well, that's exactly what he's doing. My question to him was, last year, how much advertising did the Denver Post receive from the pharmaceutical companies like Merck and, others out there who are making vaccines? Because I guarantee you that they do get that advertising, which goes back to that whole thread in the first hour. So
yes, he's being compensated to look the other way. The same way Christians and New Age people are being told that they will also be compensated with a rapture or an ascension with looking the other way. That's corruption. It doesn't work like that. We can't keep looking the other way.
See, to me, that's counterfeit spirituality, because my spirituality says I am accountable. It says I am my brother's keeper, and it says that I am an active force that came into this world at this time to do a very specific thing. And I believe
it's a moral core, Randy.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
and here's the tip-off. We do have an obligation, and here's the tip-off. When there are people working for the establishment and their power, whether they know it or not, you will always hear the same two things regardless of how they word it. And the first one is they repeat the hostile alien invasion narrative repeatedly. The second one is you don't actually have to do anything to change your situation. Those people cannot help you because they don't intend to. That is not their intent.
Again, I think we need to get back to an understanding of it. To be fully human is to be able to feel for other people. And most people, we live in a culture that actively seeks to kill that impulse in people.
Yes, but feeling is not doing. They're different. They go together.
I know, but it is the impulse of empathy which causes the man to make the commitment to jump into the river to save the child that is drowning.
That's instinct. That's instinct.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we have as preservation of the species, and only humans do it.
Yeah, but I would argue that the psychopath is not going to jump into the river to save someone.
Well, a psychopath isn't a human being. A psychopath is an aberrant.
No, that's something.
Yeah, but we live in a culture that is now is run by psychopaths and has a psychopathic model that is imposed.
For the most part, you're correct.
And just look at the way businesses are constructed. Look at the way the school systems are constructed. Those with the psychopathic personalities are usually promoted to higher levels.
Do you know when school textbook companies came under the control of school boards?
What?
Do you know how early on that happened?
You mean school boards came under the control of textbook companies, don't you?
No. Textbook companies came under the control of local school boards who voted on what textbooks they would take.
But that goes back probably 100 years ago.
Yeah. It goes back to right after the Civil War.
Yes.
Do you know what else was happening at the same time?
There's so many things. I don't know what you're asking.
Edison was flooding the U.S. Patent Office with patent requests or applications that were being approved based on his fame, which gave so many people a loss of opportunity to patent legitimate inventions that they would have to be in the courts maybe up to 40 years to win and get their patent approved and from charges of patent infringement. Edison was responsible for that.
Well, that's what led to the creation of Hollywood and the whole media empire that is now running.
These are why your country is in this shape. These are the instruments that were used.
Yes.
Well, copyright laws, were also implemented.
You don't have to have copyright laws to suppress information. It can be done by magazine distributors. It can be done by book publishers.
I'm not arguing.
The first novel that the first American realist, Theodore Dreiser, wrote, Jenny Gerhardt, was suppressed.
Well,
Doubleday had a contract with Dreiser and to publish it, and they published 20,000 volumes, 20,000 books. Then they warehoused them and wouldn't promote them because Doubleday's wife read it, and in Jenny Gerhardt, a prostitute makes good and ends up marrying a governor. She couldn't take that, so it was suppressed. These instruments of doing this, it's more a particular mindset, or was during the Victorian era of America, but since then it has become a matter of fewer and fewer people owning more and more of the media in violation of antitrust law.
And they're using the copyright laws, which were created in the patent laws in order to enforce their monopolies.
Well, it's not a matter of enforcing their monopolies. It's a matter of protecting their cartels and controlling technology. Imagine what would happen if somebody came up with technology that made a cell phone obsolete. Right now, the cell phone industry is probably the biggest electronic industry there is. Much more so than computers or iPads or anything else.
Well, we know about Nikola Tesla and his electricity through the air. That technology was suppressed. It was never allowed to be implemented.
Oh, there's so many things that could have been invented by now.
And most of the electric car technologies, going back close to 100 years, were purchased by various oil manufacturers, and they own those patents now, and they just simply suppress them.
Well, tungsten, for instance, you can make a filament out of tungsten and have a light bulb that'll last a lifetime.
Well, right now they want to sell us, they want to obsolete our filament light bulbs and give us these horrible mercury fluorescent tubes. So they're outlawing light bulbs? Are you kidding me? This is the world we live in, where they complain about environmentalism and then they turn around and they mass market light bulbs with mercury in them.
Well, if they're going to put barium, strontium, and aluminum in the air, in most places, 3 or 4 times a week with chemtrails.
Yeah, well, there you go.
And if they're going to keep the reactor cores at Fukushima burning, and if they're going to dump residue cooling water into rivers from atomic reactors, and if they're going on and on, I can go on and on all day. But
again, that goes back to my point that the current regime that's running, at least this country and most of the planet, are totally psychopathic. They have no regard for what they do, for what happens.
I agree, but I don't think that's the problem.
So what is the problem?
Policymakers have to have a certain amount of consensus with the population. A certain amount. Not 100%, but at least 90%. And people are not learning the lessons from the Gulf of Mexico disaster or from Fukushima because They cannot take an idea and follow it to a ramification. Now, why is that?
Well, for most people, because of chemicals that have been introduced in the food supply and the fluoride that's been introduced in the water supply, that inhibit people's ability to think analytically.
Well, this has been going on long before there were fluoridation. There was fluoridation and chlorine put in water. You talk about fluoride, but do you realize that the toothpaste companies did something much worse 50 years ago? They made toothpaste tubes out of lead.
Yes,
but here's the thing. Here's the thing, to go back to what Ev said a moment ago. Yes, they're psychopaths. So what's the answer? These people are pushing the buttons. They are turning creation in on itself because they learned how, and they never shared it with the rest of us so that we would not know when and how they're doing it. They have to be removed. They have to. And that means that we can't be apathetic and just talk about how spiritual we are all day and not do it.
I understand that, but then my question is, how do you get people to realize that, what is going on?
Well, there's a difference between the European and the American, and that difference is based on the fact that most European countries have been occupied in the last 50 years. America hasn't been occupied since 1812, and that was just for a short period of time.
Well, there's some who would argue that with the Civil War that we've been under a military control since the time.
You're talking about the South under Reconstruction, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I would argue that was
I think that's a good point. That was a social experiment.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what Reconstruction was.
That was the first social engineering on the scale that we see today. And the monsters learned from it. They learned how to control one area of the country from another area of the country and keep all of the profit going into the banks in the East.
Well, I would say that the same system is in place now that was in place at the time of the Civil War. The same descendants of some of the same players, or the same families, or whatever, Harriman
the same
and the
families.
One of the things you have to break up are these agendas. You've got people in political correctness who are the fascists of today. And, too many people are out there trying to appease them when they're in the way of historical truth. They'll tell you one historical lie after another, and then they want to put you in jail if you don't buy it.
Well, we can start with the Holocaust.
We start with the Holocaust. Start with Reconstruction.
Well, yeah.
No, I don't think there's been, and Spielberg produced this movie recently about Lincoln, which, was kind of a glorification of him.
It shouldn't have been.
No, all of the history that's being taught about what happened in the Civil War, that was total warfare. What Sherman did in the South, the destruction of crops and the burning of farms, the burning of Atlanta. I mean, this kind of warfare, was replicated many, many times over and again, afterwards. But this was an unusual event. This was not something.
I would argue that in a lot of ways, I think we're being pressed into a similar, if not, it's not identical, but similar thing now. When we begin to talk about the inevitability, and I hope that's not what we're talking about, that we have to take up arms in order to reassert ourselves, that's what we're talking about.
Randy, I'll tell you this. If you don't have arms, you can give it up.
I'm not arguing against the arms, but I am bothered by the meme. I'm bothered by the idea that this Civil War thing is inevitable, or that it offers...
It's not inevitable. No one said it was.
Or that it offers a reasonable alternative to better solutions.
Remember how they said the H-bomb was inevitable? That we were going to have World War III back in the 50s?
Sure, yeah.
Well, nobody in their right mind today is saying civil war in America is inevitable. They want to promote the idea because they want you to believe that if you resist,
it's futile,
that there'll be civil war. No.
Well, there's a way to resist that isn't going to lead to the total breakdown of society.
There always has been. There always has been. I mean, we are taught that if we don't stay in line, there's going to be chaos. And we're all the earth is going to open up and devour us all. We're taught that because the mind control employed on us in terms of fear is based on being able to scare us like little children, so when we're misbehaving and they come down on us, we just scatter like chicks.
Yes, but this goes back to the shakedown, because all of the problems that they're bringing to you to scare you with, they cause.
Of course they do. Well, you create the problem, you offer the solution, and you take more control.
Well, that's
it's
the whole
gimme.
Well, that's the whole credit system. I think that the first step that we have to disengage from the credit system, all of us.
Well, you have to have people that know how to live within their means. How many people do you know that realize that's important?
Well, I would argue that there are no means in which to live, because there is no real money in this country.
Yes, but look at all the people that back when they were making good money got themselves in debt over their heads because they did not realize it's important to live within your means. Have you ever been married to a woman that has a compulsion to spend more than you take in, no matter what it is? If you suddenly got $1 million raise, she would have that money spent before you cashed your check. I have.
But, here's the other thing about all of this. Yes, a new financial system may be called for if we're going to actually pay attention and make sure that any new laws we create will be honored, which we don't do now. But at the same time, how far are guns going to get you when these people have their fingers on buttons that can starve you by altering the weather? This is the thing. People have to think long term. People think that the only way they're ever going to go into one of these camps is if people come to their home and forcibly take them and they can't defend themselves. But I'm telling you, if these people have their way, they will starve you out and you will have nowhere else to go to get food, and you will turn your guns in to feed your family because of it. This is what people don't recognize. These people have unraveled so many of the mechanisms behind creational feedback loops, and they have done it to weaponize it, and they are turning it in on itself. They are killing nature to kill us. Guns are only going to get us so far.
Just keep this in mind, Crystal, that long before that happens, you're going to have conflicts within the machine that are going to either go one way or the other, and that will determine whether or not they have their way. And they don't know how that will turn out, and we don't know how that will turn out.
You say conflicts within the machine. Qualify that. What do you mean?
There are going to be a lot of people realize that because of hackers and because of a lot of other things that you haven't heard about.
Oh, I've heard about this part of it, yeah.
Okay, well, what I'm trying to tell you is that they know that the people cannot survive underground very long. But the people, the elite, don't. Then the elite still think that their base is on Mars and the Moon. And they're not. So they don't have the recourses they think about. And I've been saying this, I've said it over and over again. I hope that it's beginning to reach some of the people that have this pie-in-the-sky belief that they can be protected. There is no protection. But most of all, the people, the captains and lieutenants, the people that it takes to implement the New World Order, from electronics to the military and elsewhere, they are beginning to wake up and realize that they are not part of the survival plan. that they are going to be in the way.
Well, it was Hitler's Night of the Long Knives, basically. I mean, they took out, the next tier.
They took out Rom and his staff.
Yeah.
Actually used sabers on them while they were in bed together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's typical of psychopaths, is that they bring in a...
That's right. That's what I'm telling you. Now, see, you guys are thinking without taking in consideration that the machine can break down. It can come apart. It can eat itself. It has in the past, and the more technology they depend on, it's just like he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. He who lives by a mechanized technology will die by it.
Well, the whole technology is based on the electrical grid. The electrical grid goes down, and then how the surveillance system goes down as well.
Well, they have other things too, but the point that I'm making is that people that are able to use resources and to diversify, to adapt, will survive if the Earth remains survivable by or for anyone. But you're going to, the conflict within will determine whether or not this planet is going to be a place where anyone will want to live in the near future.
And I would add that I think that there are signs that this conflict is already happening, because these people have expressed repeatedly and publicly their disdain for the rest of us and how they would wipe us all off if they could, and they haven't done it yet, which means they can't. They can't do it and escape it, or they would have done it.
Well, they've basically gone for what you would call a protracted soft kill. The attrition that you see in Africa.
Well, there is another factor, Randy. As you stress people, you see certain adaptive qualities that come out from genetic potentials that wouldn't otherwise. We've got a couple of people... I want to qualify this before you finish, James, because I want to make sure that people understand what he's saying. Because for so long we've been told that we have junk DNA. There is no junk DNA, and that's what he's trying to explain.
Mm-hmm. Go.
Well, which goes back to what I was talking about the nature of consciousness, that there are abilities that man has.
These are traits. These are something additional, something that can really make a difference.
Okay.
Consciousness without awareness is pointless as far as trying to do anything about anything. But there's a couple from Chernobyl that grew up in the aftermath of Chernobyl going China, and they flourish on radiation. And sadly they've come to this country, and they're probably in the hands of the people at Langley right now. But they are extraordinary, and they are an example of this special adaptation where certain traits, if you have a population that is submitted to stark environmental changes, like those at Chernobyl, you'll have a few that will develop traits that normally would not manifest, that are recessive. The allele that determines whether or not this trait is expressed will express, even though it is not dominant. Now, they know this happens, but they like to label everything under a mutation because they don't want you to realize the alternatives, the adaptability, the supremacy of potential that lies in the earthbound human.
Are you saying that this is genetic adaptation, James?
It's more. We think of a genetic adaptation as being determined by the arrangement of genes in an allele. But normally, this is so. But you have a trait that is either phenotypic or it's genotypic. Genotypic is the potential, but it's not expressed because the genes are not of a number for dominance in the allele. But this changes under certain stresses in certain people. And what makes it non-mutational is the fact that when it happens, these people can reproduce children that have that ability. And this is what this couple is. If they produce children, those children will have the same ability. They don't talk about this. This is not something you'll ever read anywhere else. I'm telling you because I've lived through it. I've seen it before. And when these people came about, it gave me something to point to, an example. But this is what's going on.
So what special traits do these people have that
they flourish on any kind of radiation? They can eat it.
You say you've lived through this before. Can you qualify that?
I've been around through all 6 former extinctions.
Okay.
That's a lot for people to swallow, and I know that because it was a lot for me to swallow when I first heard what when James said that. But here's the thing, and I felt really hypocritical the way I first reacted because I have even written myself that we need to pay less attention to who says it and look at the information that's provided based on its merit. Does it solve anomalies? Will it fill the gaps? Can it be used across the board? Can we grow from it? Can we benefit from it? Can we use it? Can we get out of our slavery capacity if we have it? And I think that's really the essential way to look at it because we don't have it on purpose. It's like I was asking you the other day, Randy, and I will even ask Ev this. Do you know why a moon is essential for a planet like ours to become abundant and host sentient life the way it does? You can go look on the NASA website, you can Google it, you won't find it. And here's the interesting thing, and I've written about this too. People think that SETI is just about looking for signals. No, it's not. They have people whose title is multiple moon systems. That's what they're looking at. They don't want you to know because knowledge is power. That is your power. Garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, well, they were consciously suppressed knowledge for thousands of years. We know that.
Well, let me ask you a question. Who among you have never seen a UFO? Something that was you could observe doing characteristics, performing in a way that
you
could
said
not
never,
be earth-based.
Right? I just wanted to qualify the question. You said who among you have never seen? Okay, that was the question, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What's interesting is that I was listening to a program here a while back, and this guy was talking about the Phoenix Lights being associated with some new advance in aerodynamics, probably from Groom Lake or wherever. But that's bizarre, and it shows that the guy didn't do any research at all, because the one fellow that's done the most research and gone out and interviewed witnesses all over Phoenix and surrounding environs, talks about how many witnesses that he had met and he had talked with that had seen 3 of these football field or more sized triangular craft sandwiched together and then disappear in a flash. Do you think that anything made on Earth can do that?
I don't know.
Well, they tell you it can to mystify you.
Do you think that it? Do you think that the last thousands of years that all the things that have been written about and drawn from caves to temples to pyramids, do you think that this was Earth-based?
I don't see any reason why it couldn't be. When you say Earth-based,
there is a reason.
Well. Okay.
It's almost like, there's a grand design in everything. And, the Al-Qaeda thing, that's our new enemy, but there are indications that they're going to make Space-Qaeda our new enemy. And, of course, they said it repeatedly, that we were attacked by people who envy our freedom. They're jealous of it. And I would say that that's the only honest thing that they ever said, because if we look at who's actually taking our freedoms away, it's certainly not anybody but them. And in terms of space, Kata, the new enemy from space, are we really to believe that people who have the technology to roam the universe are jealous of earthbound humans who are stuck here because they are so infantile and warlike and can't get past imperialism and taking whatever they want no matter who it hurts? So, in a sense, there's like a built-in mechanism in that if we cannot survive our own technology, which we never have, if we can't do it, we can't make it that far. And if we can't get out there, we can't produce the metal that would help us do it. It's like a built-in safety mechanism.
This is OffPlanet Radio.